right, cause it can't miss. All about the game, that's a cold switch. Serving up the truth, call it ruthless. Tune in and get your fix from Blake and Vish Sports.
How good do you think the Patriots will be with Mac Jones?
Yeah, it's a good one, right? So they took Mac Jones 15th. They just cut Cam Newton, and Brian Hoyer. So it looks like Mac Jones, just give him the keys already. Everything's in. And I really like the Patriots this year. Obviously, last year was a down year for them. They lost a lot of players to free agency, mainly their quarterback who's been there for 2 decades, and then a ton of guys on the defensive side. But I think realistically, they can win 10 or 11 games. I'd put them. I'm putting them at 10. That's my mark. So 10-7 this year. And here's why. I think this is one of the rosters that has had the most turnover from last year. Now their offense, they struggled a lot. They were 27th in points. One of the worst passing offenses. Really good running though. Their running was great. But when you look at who they added this offseason, it's crazy they're not being talked about more. So the only really big losses they had were Joe Thuney on the offensive side. But who they added is incredible. They got Trent Brown, the 2 tight ends, Jonnu Smith, and Hunter Henry. And then they got a few receivers, Nelson Aguilar, Kendrick Bourne, who they did just cut. And then they re-signed James White. So I look at that and I think, wow, that's a lot of people who they just got. And now they're still missing that like superstar offensive guy. Like they don't have the Gronk or the Randy Moss or the Welker, but they do have just like every skill position just has a ton of good guys that I really like. And I think this offense will get back on track. Their defense, Bill's just one of the best defensive minds, if not the best in the game right now. So they added more guys like Van Noy to that defense and then brought back some guys like Dietrich Wise. So I'm taking them at 10 wins, and I think Mac Jones is going to have a big year. And then one thing more with him is I think out of all the rookie quarterbacks, he's going to be asked to do the least amount for their respective team. All these other guys starting could realistically be asked to throw 30, 40 passes in a tough game. Maybe not Lance because they run a lot just like the Patriots, but all the other guys are going to be asked to do the most. And so I think Mac Jones will have the least on his shoulders to, I guess, carry this team. So I'm interested to see how they do, but I'm going 10 wins. But I want to get your thoughts.
Yeah, I'd go 10 wins as well. As everybody knows, we did a topic maybe a day before Cam Newton got cut on who they should start. And Blake said start Mac Jones from day one. And me being the Cam Newton fan I am, I said start Cam Newton. I was wrong. They are starting Mac Jones. I think it's a good decision. I think Mac Jones has looked phenomenal all preseason, and he certainly looks the part of a guy that could start week 1. In terms of how good they can be with Mac Jones, it's the same as how good I thought they can be with Cam Newton. I think they can be a 10 to 11 win team, just like you mentioned. You talked about their defense, right? The returning pieces. Getting Dante Hightower back is obviously huge. Now, not having Stephon Gilmore for the first 7 to 8 games of the season is going to be tough. But I think you just look at their secondary. I still like it a lot. Devin McCourty is really good. I'm a fan of Kyle Duggar. They drafted him out of Lenore Nye. Excuse me. A college called Lenore. I'm not going to bother pronouncing it, but they drafted Kyle Duggar 2 years ago, and he's a phenomenal athlete. And I thought he looked the part this preseason. And I'm excited to see what he does because I think he's kind of their versatile piece that they're going to use to cover tight ends the way Eric Rowe is Miami's piece to do that. I think their defensive line is improved, especially you and I both really like the draft pick of Christian Barmore. And now I don't expect him to contribute heavily as a rookie, but I expect him to help out. Obviously, Judon. I think then you look at how Josh Uche has looked throughout training camp in this preseason. I just see all of this, and I think they're going to have a really, really good defense. Now, then it goes to their offense, and the way Mac Jones has looked, when you look at the way their offense is built to run the ball, elite run blocking offensive line, elite running back depth. They don't have that superstar, but Damian Harris is a good running back one. And then guys like, these Patriots running backs have been killing it this preseason. J.J. Taylor looked fantastic. Ramondre Stevenson looks like a steal. So you look at those people, and I look at it, and they're going to be able to run the football. I like Kendrick Bourne and Aguilar as additions to what they're going to do on offense, and I think Jacoby Myers is more reliable than he's given credit for. I think that's a solid trio in terms of just guys that are going to be able to make those 5-catch, 50-yard type games for Mac Jones to be consistent and efficient. And then I think Jonnu Smith adds explosiveness to their offense, and Hunter Henry is consistent. I think New England really is one of those underrated teams where they check every single box. They can rush the passer. They're well coached. We'll see with Mac Jones, but he can be an efficient quarterback. He certainly looks like he could be that as a rookie, efficient and accurate. They can run the football. They can defend the pass. They can stop the run. They really check every box. I think the big question for this team is the quarterback, and I thought they were capable of being a borderline Super Bowl team with Cam Newton. Mac Jones, obviously, to me, has looked excellent in this preseason. I still don't know if he's better outright than Cam Newton. I mean, Cam Newton was an MVP of this league, even though it was 6 years ago. But I definitely believe that New England is going to be way better than people are giving them credit for. And I could see 10 to 11 wins easily.
And I think the main reason people aren't really hyping them up is because there's nothing that's like super flashy or just really exciting about their offense. Like, you look at their receiving core and everyone wants to tear it down and say how terrible it is. Now, it's definitely not the best, but like having Aguilar, who's a deep threat, Jacoby Myers, pretty solid in the slot, 2 good tight ends from last year. Like, they've done everything they can to kind of alleviate their weak points. And then their running game is, again, just like not the most exciting thing, but it's really efficient. They had the 5th most yards, I want to say, rushing the ball last year, and I can continue to see that happening. And Ramondre Stevenson, I don't know if you really like this guy, but I think he will be something. He just gives me like Patriots, like almost old LeGarrette Blount type of feeling. Like, I don't think he's as big as he was, but he is explosive and super agile for being someone who's 250 pounds. So I still think they'll run the ball really, really, really well. And James White's back too, so he's going to somehow end up with 60 catches at some point.
I'm actually a fan. Like, you like Ramondre Stevenson. I thought the other guy flashed too a lot, J.J. Taylor.
Yeah.
I think there's a reason they traded Sony Michel out and out. I don't think Sony Michel would have even made this team because Ramondre Stevenson, J.J. Taylor, James White, and Damian Harris might be the best running back room in the NFL. And you and I were talking about Damian Harris not this time last year, but at the end of last season when he was really popping off. New England wasn't a football team that was really in everybody's conversation because obviously Cam Newton had the COVID, so they fell off early in the season. And then they finally found their rhythm, and they finished – did they finish 8-8 or 7-9 last year? They finished right around 500, and yet people weren't really –
7-9.
Yeah, and people were acting like they were a bad football team when they were really – Cam Newton doesn't get COVID, they might beat the Chiefs and things might go a little bit different. All of a sudden, New England's in the playoffs. And that was with all those opt-outs, no Brady, all of that, which is where, when people say, oh, it's all Brady in New England, Belichick didn't do anything. I was like, no, with not a very good team last year, New England was right in the thick of things. And part of that reason was they finally found an identity at the end of last year. And that identity was being able to run the football. And Damian Harris was a big part of that. And I don't see that really changing here because I think Damian Harris has looked terrific. And I think their offensive line, even with the loss of Joe Thuney, is still a really, really good offensive line up front with the run blocking. And I think Trent Brown, who played really well for them when they got him originally from the 49ers, was okay for the Raiders, wasn't as good. I think he'll be really good for them again. So I think for the most part, I expect New England to be a really good football team.
I really think the only thing that's kind of stopping them from being talked about more is just how loaded the AFC is. And then even specifically in their own division, the AFC West or the AFC East, sorry. The Bills were the number 2 seed, and it looks like they're kind of still up there with bringing back their same core. The Dolphins, another year with Tua, and they added a ton of new guys like Waddle, Phillips, and then other guys in free agency. And then the Jets, they're a younger team and still will struggle this year most likely, but Zach Wilson has got to be scary. And I know you've seen the graphic at kind of the NFC or the AFC East quarterbacks, and Josh Allen's the oldest one, and he's going into his 4th year. It just shows how young and how new this whole division is with just the faces at quarterback. So I'm excited to see kind of how that plays out this year, but I still think they could potentially get this number 2 seed in that division.
Right, and I'll take this a step further, actually. You talked about how they're not getting talked about enough and their defense, and they kind of fall into the range of a bunch of different teams that could be really good. I mean, you could even throw teams like Denver. Like Denver is out and out, loaded at every position, but they have a question mark at quarterback. You don't know. And then you have teams like Tennessee and Indianapolis who are really, really good, but they're not that Super Bowl level tier team. To me, outside of Buffalo, Kansas City, and Cleveland, the AFC is wide open. And right now, I really would, if I had to put my money somewhere, I would put my money on New England being the fourth best team in the AFC. I still think Tennessee has question marks on defense. I don't like Teddy. I like Mac Jones more than Teddy Bridgewater even today. So I have concerns about Denver from that standpoint. I think the Chargers are still missing a few pieces, even though Herbert and Brandon Staley is a good duo moving forward. The Raiders, obviously, their defense, it's hopeless to me at this point. To me, Baltimore, there's question marks at their offensive line, their receiver position, just their supporting cast around Lamar, including I still have questions also about their interior linebackers and the fact that they have an elderly interior defensive line. I think that if you have a point where last year, like Calais Campbell got hurt and Brandon Williams gets hurt, like I think they lack depth there.
They're a little older too.
Yeah, and obviously Jacksonville's. I'm not interested in them. Houston, I'm not interested in them. Miami, I like them a lot. I think they're loaded in every spot. I'm just not sure it comes together for Miami maybe in the same way it has the last couple of seasons, because I think there's a lot more expectations on them. And I think responding to those expectations will be a little more difficult. And because New England plays a slightly easier schedule, in my opinion, than Miami. So because of that, honestly, I really think that, and given Indianapolis, all the injuries they have all over their roster, I would put my money, honestly, on New England being that fourth team with Mac Jones.
Yeah, they are definitely up there. I mean, the AFC, I think the mid-tier AFC teams, I think you mentioned them, the Titans, the Colts, the Dolphins, the Patriots, the Ravens. I mean, that is just, filling out the AFC 4 through 7 positions is going to be just an absolute bloodbath at how that goes. And who knows, maybe Mahomes or Josh Allen gets injured and another one of these teams can kind of step up into that, realm of top-tier teams. But the Patriots definitely have the capabilities to do that. A lot is riding on Mac Jones, though, and he's looked good so far, although it's only preseason. But this roster is pretty loaded, and they have potential to make the playoffs and do some damage. So,
can I say one thing that stood out about Mac Jones to me?
Sure.
Like, I was someone who was making the argument that Mac Jones is more athletic than people were giving him credit for. It was just the fact that he was in a draft with 4 super like upper echelon athletes in Wilson, Lawrence, Lance, and Fields. To me, he's actually even looked more athletic than what I expected. Like, he genuinely looks nimble in terms of his ability to move. Like, he does. I'm not gonna say he looks like a runner, but he definitely doesn't look like a statue quarterback. He looks mobile.
I mean, it's the tennis feet. He's been practicing the tennis, and now it's just paying off with his pocket presence. But he does move pretty well in the pocket.
Yeah, it could be those tennis feet. I know that was really overstated in the draft process. Like, oh, he moves really well because of his tennis feet. But his feet are always in rhythm, which is actually very true and very important when you're playing quarterback. Because, Kyle Shanahan has talked about it with Trey Lance's accuracy. One of the issues is he feels Trey Lance's feet lose a little bit of rhythm. He gets late, and then he's rushing everything on how he's throwing, and that's where his accuracy gets messed up. So Mac Jones does have that. But really, I was surprised that he's more nimble and athletic than I expected. I thought he looked more nimble and athletic than what I saw of Tua last year. Now, Tua was coming off of a hip injury, but if you look at it's polarizing because the perception was Tua. People were saying Tua's like a Russell Wilson type athlete, and even off the hip injury, when he's looking and moving much better, Tua's obviously nowhere near that athlete.
Yeah, definitely not.
But people were saying Mac Jones is just a straight statue, heavy-footed, slow, and all of that, and those were criticisms levied at him before the draft. I didn't agree with them before the draft, but even if I go a bit further, to me, he looks more athletic within the pocket than what I saw of Tua last year, which is, I think, goes to show you how pre-draft narratives. I'll never not lose an opportunity to take shots at pre-draft narratives. There's another BS one for you.
Yeah, it's kind of weird thinking about him being athletic when you're comparing him to like Trey Lance, Justin Fields, even a guy like Trevor Lawrence and Zach Wilson have that advantage. And it can still be really good in the pocket, and you don't have to be, 6'5", 240, run a 4.5 40. Like, one person who came to my mind is Tony Romo. Now, he wasn't the fastest guy, but like him, I wouldn't say Mac Jones is as good in the pocket as Romo, like evading pressure. Like, you remember the play against the Texans, the spin out against J.J. Watt. Like, he was really, really good in the pocket. And he's not like just some insane, world-beating athlete, but just really good with his feet.
The Tony Romo comp, I actually really, really get that one because Romo, there were two things about Romo that stood out to me always. His accuracy was unbelievable, top notch. Mac Jones has unbelievable accuracy, and he had a nimble way of making people miss. And I think people misconstrued Tony Romo's nimble way of making people miss is just pure foot speed mobility. That's why people compare Joe Burrow to Tony Romo, but to me, Burrow was just out and out a better athlete. Like, to me, you couldn't run a read option play or a zone read play with Joe Burrow. I think, or with Tony Romo, excuse me. I think you could run Joe Burrow 10 times a game with how athletic. Now, you wouldn't want to do that, obviously, with him.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that I think he's that good of a runner. But in Tony Romo's gift was like, it was almost Mahomes-like, right? Because Mahomes actually only runs a 4.8 40, but people think he's so athletic because he has such a way of making people miss, and he's so quick in tight spaces. I'm not saying Mac is that level athlete, but I think the comparison is to those guys in the sense that he's good in tight spaces and can make people miss. Now, not as well as those guys, but I think the Tony Romo comp is interesting because it's an underrated athleticism almost. It's not like he's a heavy-footed statue. You can hit him, all of that. He has an underrated movement ability and aspect. It's tough to describe because I'm throwing out really lofty comparisons when I say Mahomes and Tony Romo. But the point is to say that his movement ability, to me, which I thought was underrated before the draft, is actually shockingly like it's above average for a pocket passer, in my opinion.
And yeah, it's like, there are a few guys, like, just watch Alex Smith last year. Like, you just knew that once he dropped back, like, he was not leaving the pocket. There's just like no chance of that actually happening. But like, I'd say a guy like Mac Jones, like, you could realistically see him, maneuver the pocket, get outside. If it's 3rd and 2 and there's an open crease down the middle, like, he can realistically pick that up and see that and do that. So yeah. I agree with you on that.
Or if there's a guy like I think he's actually quick enough to, like, if you have a free rusher on him, like the really great quarterbacks, like the Mahomes, Allens, that when they go 5 receivers, obviously Burrow did this. They account for the free rusher, and they're so good in the pocket, they'll make the free rusher miss and still make the throw on time and on schedule. I'm not saying he can do it like them, but I do think he's capable of making a guy miss in a tight space, which is not what people were saying about him or trying to portray of him before the draft and all of that.
Definitely. Yeah, so I guess going back off of this tangent, we think the Patriots 10-7, potentially more wins, just depending on how the cookie crumbles, but 10-7, maybe 11-6 for the Patriots this year with Mac Jones.
Agreed.